Hello, my elegant warriors. Welcome back to How to Advocate, the new season of the podcast where we're talking about how to advocate for yourself, your ideas, and your potential. And today we have a fellow advocate on the podcast. Danielle Sunberg is a multi award winning author and TEDx speaker, and she coaches high performers and advises social impact organizations on authentic leadership. She specializes in conscious self development and guides individuals and groups to cultivate personal mastery as the key to experiencing our full potential. She's a former commercial litigator at a Washington, D.C. law firm, and her journey took a pivotal turn after she successfully defended a client against a $6 billion judgment. Extreme burnout, stress, and overwhelm led to a diagnosis of depression. So Danielle left her firm and traveled 6 continents, exploring how to create authentic well being. Her exploration led to her phenomenal book, Atlas of Being, and she founded a wellness CPG company that was publicly acquired in 2023. Now she works guiding high performers like you and me on how to do some of the things that she has mastered. Welcome, Danielle.
Thank you, Heather. It's so great to be here with you.
It's so good to have you. I read the book, of course, and I have so many questions. It's so intriguing to me. We talked just briefly before we started, and I served as a trial attorney for over 20 years before I had the wherewithal to shift. You made that shift much sooner. What do you attribute your ability to do that to? I know that for me, being an attorney was such an identity as well as a job. And I'm wondering what gave you the insight to be able to do that so young?
That's a great question. Part of it was being in this office where I could see my future 10, 15 years down the line, just 10 feet down the hall in the partners' offices, right? And I could see what my life would become if I stayed on this track. And while I didn't long for partnership, I know that's sort of the holy grail for the industry is, make partner. And I wasn't sold on that entirely yet anyway. So my eyes were a little bit unclouded by longing, as they say. And I could see clearly that that wasn't, it didn't look good. It just didn't look fun. And I was like, okay, what does it take for me to get from where I am now, where I'm also feeling already this intense level of burnout, stress, depression, my hair is going gray. And I had to stay on that track for the next 10, 15 years. And it just was, my stomach would sink. And so ultimately I had to make a choice, and it felt riskier to stay than it did to leave.
Yeah, I think that's the difference. I loved it at first. So for me, it took a while for me to sort of get sick of it, not get the high anymore. Trying cases became more stressful instead of less stressful because I was winning and nothing fails like success. So I think that that was a little bit of a shift. One of the things you say very early in the book, and it's a line that I love, so I'm going to quote it. You said, "I would have welcomed the pain from point shoes, but you begrudge them from stilettos." And it's
Mhm.
such a good line because we are willing to accept pain, do hard things, overcome challenges when we love the thing we're doing. And it sounds like you were certainly not at a point where you were loving it.
Yeah, that's such a good point. My childhood dream was to be a ballerina. And so point shoes are what ballerinas wear when they go, high up on their tippy toes.
Yeah.
And you should see the way their feet look when they take off those point shoes. They look so elegant on stage, and then they take those shoes off and they are bloody and torn up. And I would have welcomed that. I truly would have. And that's what I sort of have a thorn in my side about the word hard work. I don't know how you feel about hard work, but when people say, oh gosh, it takes hard work, you got to put in hard work, that sort of speaks to what you're saying is it hard work because you're sacrificing and you're stressed and you're experiencing emotional and mental and physical unwellness and you're willing to sacrifice it all for whatever you're chasing? Or can it be hard work because we're putting in the effort and the time and we love it?
I love that differential. I also don't love like it's hard. And even we can do hard things. I love Glennon Doyle and but I feel like when we say it's hard, it's as if I don't love that either. I often talk about discomfort. It's uncomfortable. Just like wearing those point shoes are uncomfortable. And some discomfort is there for growth. And so, and I, when we get into your story, you traveled the world. There were certainly uncomfortable places where you stayed. There were uncomfortable moments in that travel. And yet that discomfort was there for growth. It's when the discomfort is there and you're not growing and you're not enjoying any aspect of it that it really becomes harmful, not only to our psyches and our minds, but also to our bodies. So I appreciate the differential between hard work and discomfort
Mm.
that ultimately leads to growth.
Mhm.
In the book, you split it up into 4 sections. You've got mind, energy, expansion, and transformation. What made you choose those four?
So it was pretty much my journey that I went through, which was starting in the mind, which is where most of Western society starts. We end up living trapped in our minds. And it was the experience of understanding my mind, coming to a different relationship with my mind and my thoughts than I had ever before been exposed to or experienced. Something, basically like we are not our thoughts, that kind of experience, and really understanding the power and the creative force that thoughts have to create our reality. And then, dropping beneath the mind to what else is part of being human that I had never really touched, or I had touched when I was a kid, right? Before we develop a really powerful, rational mind. And so rediscovering that and exploring energy was what came next. And then essentially all of the awareness that I had gained from that exploration was completely expansive. So we get to section 3, expanding how I understood who I was and my relationship to the world and how I showed up in it, which led to section 4, a huge transformation in how I operate in my life day to day.
Yeah, it's beautifully laid out. It's laid out like a lawyer, right? Very like sequential and logical, and yet, so much of your work is not logical, but it's beautifully laid out. And there's a part of the book, this difference between thoughts and beliefs. It's something that I talk about a lot in my work, and I loved the way that you talked about it. On page 35, you start to talk about holding two thoughts at the same time and the magic of both sides of the coin. And I'm wondering, I feel as though that is one of the gifts of having been a lawyer, that we as lawyers are trained to see both sides. And so we go out in the world and bring that training with us. So oftentimes people give me a hard time because they'll say, like, I'm a fence sitter. But it's truly that I can see both sides of almost every argument. It's not that I don't have an opinion, but it's that I can understand both sides and actually could easily make the argument for both sides. Do you find that's true of you? And do you find that that has helped you in sort of this perspective taking that you talk about in the book?
That's an incredible interpretation of it. I love that. Um, yes, it definitely is a superpower to be able to do that. And in some respects, I think as attorneys, you have to be able to do that, because you have to get into the mind of your opponent and guess, what they're going to argue to the judge, and then have your counter argument ready. Um, there is also a dissonance in having a thought, a belief in our minds, and then having a feeling in our hearts and our bodies. And that's where so much tension often lives for us, when we can feel stuck in making decisions about what to do. Because, rationally on paper, A looks like the right choice, but something in us is resisting it. And so a lot of that work is making space for that resistance to show up and acknowledge it without needing it to go away or doing something with it. Just kind of noticing, okay, I am holding two things at once here, and that is worth exploring.
Yeah, I think it's such a great point. I know for myself, I can often do thought, action, thought, action, thought, action without stopping to feel the feelings that come in between there, that certain thoughts, and you make the beautiful point that beliefs are actually, and I talk about this a lot. I don't think it's our thoughts that lead to our feelings. I think it's our beliefs that lead to our feelings. And I think that there is a major difference there. But so often, so many of us, especially type A, six-seaters, drivers, we don't even take the time to feel the feelings, to know what it is that we're thinking or believing that's leading to the action. How do you recommend that people get to that space where they do feel the feelings?
I actually just started working with a client who specifically said to me, Danielle, I want to learn how to feel my feelings. And first of all, that
Yeah.
awareness
Yeah.
is so incredible. It made me really excited to work with her.
Yeah.
So the homework that I give her is it's really about dropping from the head into the heart. And it's just a process of doing that while giving us back awareness of what's going on the whole time. So it just looks like having a journal. And when you have a big emotion, noticing it and writing it down. What am I feeling? Maybe you're not sure what that feeling is. Well, the second question is describe the experience. Because after a while, you'll see a pattern and you'll get familiar with it, and something will gel of what this is. The next question is, what was happening when I felt it? So what was going on outside in our, reality, our external reality? And then what was going on in my internal reality? Meaning, what thought was I thinking when this happened? So when the coffee spilled on my shirt and I felt angry, what was the thought that I was actually thinking? Something like, I have to go to a big interview and I don't have another shirt in my bag, and oh no, my life is ruined,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Right.
Because someone else could have the same experience of the coffee spilling on their shirt and not have the same anger. So it's really about what's going on in your state of mind.
Yeah. And that's a great process to bring people through, because a lot of my clients as well struggle with the feelings and feeling the feelings. And so your client put it into words beautifully, but I see it oftentimes, especially, my leaders, the people who are really drivers, they don't think that they have time to feel the feelings, or that they should ignore the feelings instead of feeling them, recognizing that oftentimes you can change your feelings when you change your beliefs and change your
Mhm.
thoughts, and then trying to do that work after they have gone through the process of feeling it. So that four-step process you just gave us is quite helpful in that kind of following it through before you start acting on it. You, on page 43, you talk about contracts with ourselves. And I think that that's a great way to sort of talk about the way that we do have contracts with ourselves. We have conversations with ourselves. We persuade ourselves to believe some things and not to believe other things. And you talk about how it's our beliefs that allow us to make contracts with ourselves. Tell the listeners a little bit more about that in a more articulate way than I just did.
Yeah, I think so. I think that was a chapter where I'm talking about sailing in Greece.
Yes.
And so I'll just share this story really quickly. So I had an incredible opportunity to sail on a catamaran for a week through the Greek islands with my husband, Ted, and three other couples. And on about day 5 of that sailing adventure, our captain says he's going to take us to this remote island. We'll have it all to ourselves. And we get, really excited. We're like, great, let's go. And we start sailing, and it's not long before we realize that there is a huge storm coming our way. And we can see those dark, dense gray clouds coming in and hear the rumble of the thunder. And the boat is starting to rock. And one of my girlfriends is seasick, and she had 4 seasickness patches, and this was day 5. So
Oh,
she's
no.
getting a little green. And she's starting to cower in her boyfriend's lap, and the rain is coming down, and she's just, feeling that overwhelm of, oh no, oh no, oh no. Meanwhile, my husband, Ted, is from Florida. So hurricane storms for him are just another season. So he runs into the boat, comes out with his rain jacket on, and he is just howling into the storm like Neptune, god of the sea, having a great time. Meanwhile, my friend is starting to text notes of love and farewell to family and friends in case we capsize and we're never seen again. And so, we arrive safely where we're going eventually. And I'm sitting there thinking about, how did these 2 people have such different experiences when we're on the same boat? We're in the same storm. We're mortals made of the same, flesh and bone. And the only difference were the thoughts in their head. But to get to your point about the contracts and the beliefs piece, so Ted, my husband, could have had a thought that we were going to capsize. Yet he didn't believe it. He gave it no power. So it's an agreement that comes in with the thought written on it, and there's room for you to sign it and make it powerful, to give it life. And he said, nope, not that one. And instead, he signed a different agreement, which I don't know what it is because I don't know the thought, but it was one that allowed him to believe that we were going to be fine and he could have fun. So that's what I mean by signing those internal agreements about what are the thoughts that we're going to give the power to shape our lives.
What do you say to people? Because I think that our thoughts, our beliefs are so much, that they make up our entire lives, and that choice makes up our entire lives. And yet, so much of those beliefs are based on the evidence of our experience. So Ted had the experience of having lived in Florida and having had, been safe through other similar storms, whereas Anne, I think, was your friend's name in the book. If I'm
Homily.
okay. She, didn't have that experience and maybe had some negative experiences. And it also reminds me, I recently read something about, we talk a lot about choice, but the ability to make choices often takes privileges that we forget that we have, like money. The article was about choosing to cancel a wedding and how expensive that can be. And not everybody has that kind of money to even feel like they can make those choices. So when you've got people who don't have the privilege that we do, don't have the evidence that we do, how do you counsel them to choose different thoughts or to make different contracts?
Yeah. So, what I really point people back to is who we are in our natural state before our minds come in and play their part of grabbing different evidence and building belief systems for us. Because when we understand and feel connected to that natural state of being, anything is possible. Because we are essentially pure potential. Like that is what it means to be made of energy. Energy is pure potential. It can be used to beat our hearts, right? To grow our fingernails, to digest our food. It is for everything and anything. And when we feel truly connected to that state, the realm of possibility opens up, and what we choose comes from a state of inspiration and connection. Doesn't matter what you believe. It doesn't matter what you fear. It doesn't matter what you think. It's all there still. It hasn't gone away. We've just put it on a shelf for a little bit so you can connect with something deeper.
How do you encourage people to do that? Like, I know, if I remember correctly in the book, there was your husband went to a cryptocurrency session, and some people try psychedelics for these types of things. Some people try meditation for these types of things. I know that the company that you sold was a cannabis company. How do you get people? Because I'm thinking of my listener who's saying, that's great for you guys. You have money, you have education, you have these experiences. I can't take 6 months and go travel the world. I
Mhm.
can't, quit my job and start a new business. And what I tell them is to take little steps to start to create evidence so that they can build that belief. But what you're talking about seems to be the freeway as opposed to taking these little steps. And so, what are the how? What's the how of that for the listener?
Yeah. So it's really simple. It really is. Like, I do not buy into these, 10 steps to clarity and whatever kind of things that are in our marketplace so much, because it really is getting our mind more involved than it needs to be. What it's really about is kind of peeling back all the noise and giving ourselves something that slows us down. So to me, it's stillness. It is the key. And it is something that we know, and intellectually we might understand, oh yeah, those 10 minutes when I'm walking around the neighborhood and I'm just enjoying that kind of slow space, mental space, that's when I get my clarity, my insight, my feeling of inspiration for the day, or feel resilient to then go take on whatever comes next. It's so powerful. And yet we go back into the rush of life and we forget. So a lot of it is simply habit building. It's not that there is this really complex way to do it.
Yeah, it's a that stillness piece is so interesting because I know how good it is for me. And yet there's something in me that just avoids it. You know, pick up the phone, listen to a podcast, turn on the music, don't allow for the stillness. So it's definitely something that we can all go back to. And it's something we carry with us everywhere we go, which is no matter who you are and no matter what your privilege is. So that's phenomenal. I can't believe how quickly this time is going by. I do want to, one more question about the book. You talk in the book about living a life that inspires you. And I want to see if you can give the listeners some insight into how they can begin to do that today, an actionable tip or two that they can do to begin to live a life that inspires them today.
Oh man, yeah, that's like the holy grail question. I mean, thanks for taking it easy on me. I mean, I'll say this, when I wrote that, what I was pointing to was the difference from when I was an attorney and I was looking in the mirror. And okay, so when I was coming home, I had all these interactions with people and they would look at me and in their eyes, I would see a reflection of who they thought I was, which was this high-powered, prestigious attorney who had it made. And for a while, that's what I was looking for. That's what I needed. But when I was coming home and looking at my reflection in the mirror in my own eyes, there was emptiness. There was no one home. So when I say I was living a life that inspired me, I'm saying that I woke up and looked in the mirror and I was home. I was there. And it didn't matter as much what I was doing, which is what we tend to think of when we think about, oh, how do I create my inspiring life? Like win big, achieve, big, have lots of zeros in our bank accounts, take the family on a fancy vacation. That's all very inspiring. And it can be that. I'm not saying it can't be that. But for me, I was a new mom. I, was waking up early in the morning. I had milk stains all over my clothes. I was barely getting out of a rocking chair. I was going back and forth between writing the book, being with my baby, and running a company. And, maybe that's inspiring to some people, but it was just a lot of work.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I would first say that when you think about what is inspiring to you, yeah, of course, vision it out. What does it look like? But what does it feel like?
Yeah.
Right? And then look for what are the things in your life right now that connect you to that feeling right now. Because I guarantee there's something, even if it's just the simple moment of sitting with your cup of coffee and having the first sip and going, which is the sound I make.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it goes back to the feeling that we were talking about earlier, and that your coaching client so beautifully said that that's the work that they want to do. It's the work that many of us can do to figure out what does inspire us and what does inspiration feel like in your body, which not everybody can tune into as well. And I often talk about your beliefs are often what create those feelings. So what are you thinking and what are you believing that's leading to that feeling of inspiration as well. So it's aspirational for sure, but it's something we can aspire to. I do want to point out this is not from the book, but it's from your Instagram page, and you talk about. And I loved this. It had me thinking, which is always my favorite thing. You said maybe being busy is how we waste time. And that I'm very big on efficiency and moving forward and getting things done, and I'm very impatient. And so that really made me think, are all of the things that I'm doing that are keeping me so busy, and I'm putting this in quotes for those who aren't watching on YouTube, um, are they actually wasting my time? Tell us more about that idea.
Yeah, there's a great Peter Drucker quote that I'm gonna ruin. That's basically like there's nothing as terrible as doing what need not be done.
Mhm.
Um, and I mean, we live in a culture where we've come to value productivity and our doing, and we get our dopamine hits from checking things off our to-do lists. And like you were saying earlier, it's also an escape hatch from being with ourselves and being with our feelings and our thoughts. And instead, we go get something done so we can feel good about ourselves because it's scary. We don't know what we'll feel
Yeah.
if we just sit with ourselves.
Yeah.
It's I'm an emotional eater for sure. And a lot of it can be that. It could be watching Netflix. It can be your glass of wine. It can be just being super social because you don't want to be alone with yourself. We are so good at being busy. And if we were just a little bit stiller, a little bit more silent, and gave a little bit more space for who we are to show up in our own experience, life could transform quicker than you can imagine.
Yeah, it's so good. And your Instagram, well, tell the listeners what your Instagram handle is so they can go find your phenomenal page with all the good things that you share.
It's just my name, Danielle Sunberg.
And we'll put a link to that in the show notes. We'll put a link to Danielle's website on the show notes. We'll put a link to her book, Atlas of Being, in the show notes. Before I let you go, Danielle, we always end with the same three questions. The first question is about elegance, because the root of that word is to choose, and we believe that you choose your elegance. What does that word elegance mean to you?
I didn't know the root of it was to choose.
Yeah, it's the same as
Uh,
elect.
oh, okay. I'm going to do a little deep dive into elegance. So when I was thinking about elegance, I was really thinking about the mastery of something and how, like a jazz player kind of analogy of, you got to really learn the basics. And then once you've got it all down, you can play with it. And it can feel really simple and it can look really simple from the outside, but you have done the work of baking that thing into your bones. And it just comes off so elegant.
I love that. No one has described it that way, and it is very similar to the way that I think about it. I love that definition. What book would you recommend for the listeners?
My book, 100% of the time, always, is Be Here Now by Ram Dass.
Oh my gosh, I've got to share with you because I know that you know Ram Dass, right?
He's my mentor.
Yeah. I recently posted on my Instagram one of his quotes and people have been loving it. The quote is, "You can do it like it's a great weight on you, or you can do it like it's part of the dance." And I love that quote. And so we'll put a link to that book. I've read that book as well. It's beautiful. We'll put a link to that book in the show notes as well. And then Danielle, the last question is my favorite question. Your answer to this question will go on the Elegant Warrior Spotify playlist. What is your theme song?
Oh, I'm so excited for this. It's How Far I'll Go from Moana.
Oh my gosh, I love it. And we have a new Moana coming out in the Disney's making a new one. Yes, you got to check it out. They're making a new like a Moana 2. So it's very timely.
Oh my gosh.
I'm
That's the
breaking the
high of my
news.
day just learning that. That's incredible.
Thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for this beautiful book. It really is such a deep dive into so many things, and so it's a beautiful book for the reader. And I hope that the listeners read it and gain a lot from it. I know that I did. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Heather. It's a total pleasure.